Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on the time zone we are. My name is John. As William said, I'm a senior engineer in Gap. I have been working here for 3 years, maybe a bit more. I'm not pretty sure. Uh, but I'm really happy to be doing this presentation, this talk. I wasn't able to participate on previous years, so I'm excited to do it today. Um, And what I'm going to share is my experience working on side projects using AI tools. I use them to automate processes or complex tasks, mainly code generation, uh, the control of the project management, and the process of the development. I use it like to take decisions or decide on which piece of code can be generated or a component that can be generated and improve this output. And while working with those tools, I found out that they are really, really useful, but they are more useful if you are able to have a proper communication with it, and if you are able to communicate in a clear way your objective to these AI models. And that is done by creating a good prompt. That is why I wanted to share this presentation with the Gapsters, the prompt creation and precise communication with AI models. I'm gonna share some practices that have worked for me and have given good results when trying to achieve an objective or get a specific output of these AI models. And before going to these practices and these tips that I have collected with the time, first I wanted to clarify that these practices are not only useful if you are trying to, for example, resolve a single question on an AI model, or if you are trying to achieve a simple task. It is also useful, as I said before, on a development environment. It can help to add logic, extra logic, of an extra layer of logic that can achieve much more than just the conditionals that we use to do, or the iterations that we usually have. So it will help you to communicate properly with these AI models and get an output that can be used programmatically. Um, and now I want to give some basic terms. Probably most of you already know them and aware of what are the meanings of these terms, but I want to give a quick call to it in case someone is not aware of them. And in this case, I'm going to use an AI model to do this, as more specific ChatGPT. And also it will work as an example, an exercise to get on topic about the prompt creation. So first of all, I'm gonna copy these terms because are the terms that I want the AI model to help me to define. And then I'm going to go to ChatGPT, and first of all, I'm gonna give a context. I'm going to tell it to help me to define these terms on on a method of artificial intelligence. And then I'm gonna just pass my terms. And this is a simple search. It's gonna probably give us the definition of each one of these terms, and it's gonna try to be as detailed as possible. And we could use this basic and simple question as the response for our terms. But as we are doing an exercise to see how to improve this output, we can also ask the AI model to be a bit more concise, or to reduce or resume these definitions to make it more clear for a presentation. So I'm gonna leave it to end defining them, and then I'm gonna add a new prompt, and I'm gonna request the AI model to actually give a more short definition that it's easy to memorize. So let's go. Why the definitions to make it easier to memorize? Read. So here we just requested a change on the previous output, and now the output is gonna be something more readable and more human-like for a presentation, at least. So let's go with the definitions. It says that an AI is like teaching a computer to think and learn on its own. So it can do tasks that usually require human intelligence, like understanding a speech or making decisions. This is pretty close to definition because it's based on a definition that an AI model has over artificial intelligence. It also defining a model which is program or like a way for the computer to learn from a specific data set and make predictions and decisions. This definition is not precise explaining what a model is, but it has the sense of what it is. That is a program or a technology or a tool that is able to make predictions or decisions. With the natural language is accurate. It's just the regular language that people speak. That doesn't have more meaning. LLM, as we have seen on previous presentation, is large language models, which is a technique or a technology, a machine learning, which allows us to train and decrypt the text for the machines. And a generative AI, which is this description is not as clear as possible. It could be more easier to understand. So as we can see, even if we are giving instructions over an output that already exists, it still lacks some details. And those lacks are because the prompts are not enough clear, or I didn't add enough context for those explanations. It's not giving an answer that can be easily understood, but so one that is not so related to the artificial intelligence environment. This can also be improved by asking a more basic explanation of the definitions, but we are going to proceed with this example just to have a sense of what it's a prompt and what it's an improvement on the prompt, because we are going to use this knowledge later on. We also can do things like, for example, let's do it, create a JSON object. So now first I wanted to define these words, these terms, because I wanted to make it clear for everyone what are the meanings of all these terms that we are going to use in some point of the conversation. But now let's imagine that actually the objective was to include these terms and their meanings inside an application. So one easy way to do that is actually to create a JSON. So I'm gonna request that, create a JSON object, which includes the term as the key and the definition as the content, as the value key. So let's see what does it generate. So as we see here, it actually creating the JSON object. So we come from a basic output, which is only test, to change its format and actually specify it to be a JSON and to use the terms and the definitions inside that JSON object. This will give an idea of how easy is to manage and handle the output of the AI model, but it will depend on how clear are you with your instructions and how much information you give to it. It can even be used to actually update the output if you don't like a specific definition. For example, I'm going to ask modify the generative I value to is the generation of content or an output based on an input. I'm just going to add something generic just to demonstrate that we can also modify the output by including our own knowledge. It can be this single string, it can be a value, or it can be even information that you already have, like a data set that you are giving to an AI model, or like a training or refining that you are giving to a specific AI model, and that it's gonna affect and change the final output. You have already seen on previous talks how those refinements or how those data sets can affect the output, and how useful it is to actually include information that is related to your specific context, because it can reduce the probability to fail on the output, on the generation of the output. Oh, I have a typo here. Just gonna fix it and send it. So modify the generative value to is the generation of content or an output based on an input. I'm just gonna add that simple definition with solo details. So let's check what happens. As you can see, the output now is updated, and that is because I included my knowledge, or my knowledge, even if the definition is not exactly right, but it allows us to also modify the output depending on specific instructions that we give. Now, before proceeding, let's note something that it's implicit on this conversation with the AI model. First, we are having multiple prompts to improve the output and the final output that we are receiving here. And that is possible because we are using a messages mechanisms, which simply means that we are able to request for something, see the output of that request, then request modifications over that output, and see the result of those modifications. And we can keep going forward with that strategy until we get the expected output. So we are improving the final output based on the previous iteration of that output, which is really useful if you are trying to do a process that requires multiple iterations and depends on the previous output to generate the next one. Also, this same result could be achieved by using a single prompt, but it will require for us to add all the details on the first one. We will need to ask for these terms, also specify that we want only simple definitions, easy to memorize, and simple enough for people that is not aware of the AI technologies to understand it. And also we can add a condition that it needs to be a JSON object. We could do that all in just one single big prompt. And to decide in which use depends on what you're trying to achieve. As I said, if you're trying to do something that requires multiple iterations and you need the previous result to generate the next one, then it will be useful to have a strategy of multiple messages. But if you are just trying to generate a single output, and that output can be generated with all the information that you have at hand, and it doesn't need like extra dependencies, then probably the good thing and the best way will be to create a single prompt. So first have clear what you're trying to achieve, and then you can use the strategy that is more convenient for you. No, after this exercise, we can have like a common sense, sorry, like a sense of what it's a prompt. And a prompt serves as the input provided to an AI system. It, it has specific instructions, cues, or commands that are presented to the AI model. Here, what we did was we gave instructions to this AI model to actually generate something. And based on that, we got more instructions, more limitations. We got some requirements that needs to be met in order to the output to be the right one, or the output that we want to get. And that is basically what helps us to actually generate the expected output. The prompt is the key part on generating something with an AI model. If you create a prompt that has enough information and clear instructions, then probably you are going to get what you are trying to achieve. It also transforms the output. It allows you to format and specify how needs to be presented this output. So it's really important to actually be able to create a good prompt. And know what you need to know before creating a prompt. Well, if you are just asking questions to an AI model, then you probably just need to know what you want to ask, or what are the definitions you're trying to get, or what is the simple task that you want to execute, calculate something, get a definition, get a resume, generate a table with a set of data. But if you are trying to generate something more complex, if you are trying to execute a process that has multiple steps, that has a high complexity, then you need to have a clear objective of what you are trying to achieve. You need to know the context of what you're trying to achieve. If you are trying to generate code, then you need to know in which language, which indentations rules, which are the methods necessary, which technologies are you using. You need to be clear enough on those elements so that the model actually generates what it's necessary. And also, if your process has multiple steps, then you need to have clear what are those steps and how you're going to place them on your prompts or your multiple prompts. And the best way to start creating good prompts is to stop thinking that the AI models are like an all-knowing resolver. That it's not a good way to approach them. The best way is to actually assume that the AI model doesn't know anything about your task. Like, don't assume it knows everything you are trying to achieve. And always act as if you were talking with a person or a coworker. Have in mind that these AI models and the AI technology tries to simulate the process of thinking of a human being. It's the problem-solving process of a human being. So it makes sense to actually try to communicate with it as you are with a person, with a human being, give enough the context, explain yourself clear enough, and have all the information for the task that you are asking the person to execute. Because if not, the person is not going to be able to understand what you're trying to achieve. And not being enough clear, not having enough information about this task that you are trying to achieve, not knowing the details on this specific prompt that you are passing, will lead to something called hallucinations. And for this one, I also want to give an example. But if in resume, if you don't have a clear prompt that has all the information, that doesn't have ambiguities, then you will receive an hallucination. It's bound to happen. If you don't have all the information, the AI model will assume and make up things, and will fill up the gaps with anything that it seems to fit on there. It's not gonna make sense on most of the cases. So let's check this. For example, let's ask something that doesn't make any sense, because the more complex the task is, um, the most easy to get hallucinations. But as I'm not going to do an example with a complex task, I'm gonna ask something that doesn't make too much sense. So let's create an example of a car. Here are too much things that doesn't have a meaning, or like it's in the complete sentence doesn't make too much sense. Like create an example of a car, which specific kind of example? Is it like a model? Is like an example of a car door? There is nothing specific on this prompt. So what is going to happen is that the model is trying to make up anything that makes sense for that sentence. And in this case, it's trying to generate an image. But while this is generating the image, let's wait a bit. So yeah, it's generating an image of a model of a car. But if we ask again, it's gonna generate probably, oh, well, in this case, it's actually creating multiple images. But if we try to actually regenerate the output, well, in this case, it's obviously going to generate a different image because it's not clear enough what are we requesting. We are not giving details on the car, on what it's expected to have the car, colors, anything that can, and it's generating a different card. It's having more different elements. And if we keep going, it's gonna keep generating different stuff, and probably is gonna end in a point where it's also generating text, or it's trying to like make up a card, and it's going to try to include details of that imaginary card. And that is because we are not giving enough. For example, if I was requesting for a car, I don't know, create an example of a car. Oh, is there a question? Oh, I will check it on that in a while. Sorry.
It's just a comment. The other day I request something. I was playing with my mother, in fact, and she asked to the copilot. It was in that case a cow that was doing something, but where it was an image, and it created a really nice poem. So it was curious. So that kind of an example of what you are mentioning.
Okay, yeah, it's true. If we don't are enough clear, if we have a vague description of what we are trying to achieve, or if it's an open question, it can lead to that kind of misinterpretations. For example, if we were looking for a blueprint, then and we didn't specify, then it generated this image of a car. But if we specify that it's a blueprint of a car blueprint, then it will actually try to generate something that attached to that definition or to that prompt. So let's give it a second, and then we're going to the slides. So in this case, actually generated something like that. So bear in mind, the details will help to the AI model to understand what you are trying to achieve. And the more details you are able to give to the model, the more precise that it's going to be the representation or the output that you are getting. Now, talking about the ambiguity that I mentioned before, it can be found on, as I said, on vague descriptions, policy anomalies, implicit assumptions. If you are, what I said on the on this, the key to start creating good prompts. If you are assuming that the AI model knows something and it's supposed to know something, what it's gonna happen is that probably it's gonna choose something different to what you assumed it was supposed to choose, and will generate something really different. So these elements here can actually break your prompt, can break your output. And if you are trying to programmatically include that output on a piece of logic, like in a method or like in a function, then what is going to happen is that the logic is going to break because you weren't enough clear. And having count that if you get an output that doesn't match at all on what you are trying to achieve, take a look at the prompt again and try to see if you are using words that doesn't mean exactly what you are trying to do, or maybe add more details and be more clear on what you are trying to achieve. That is like an alert. If you get an output that is totally far away from what you're doing, probably your prompt needs more definition. So let's continue. Now, to use constraints. Yeah, the constraints are basically what we saw here in this exercise before. Let me open it just real quick. So give me a second. Okay. So the constraints are things that help you know, like our things are parts of the prompt, are sentences that involve adding conditions to your prompts. It helps the model to actually focus on what you're trying to achieve, on the specifics of the objective that you are looking for. It allows to specify the format. What we did here of specifying that it's a JSON object, this is a constraint. We are closing the scope of the output to be a JSON object and to use the information that it provided before as part of that JSON. So with constraints, you are able to actually change and shape the output. And if something doesn't exactly match what you are doing, then probably what you are going to need to do is add a constraint that shapes that output to what you want. These constraints can be soft or hard, meaning that, for example, think words like would be good, nice to have are soft constraints that it can include them, but if it's not possible, it will not include them. And things like it has, it needs, or make, like words like instructions itself, they will be hard constraint that needs to be applied on the output. So the AI model will try to complete with that specific instruction. Yep. Okay. Something that I missed to mention here, skip this one, is demonstrate the expected output with the samples. Previous talks and previous presentation, we saw that they mentioned that we can try and refine or even use our own set of data for these models to generate the expected outputs. And that is basically, those are examples, or those are a data set used to transform or to specify the output of this model, or what it's expected to answer on which topic, and this like to make it more specific on what it's expected to generate. It also allows, some models also allow us to include files, pieces of code, images. So depending on the model, you can add examples that will help you to actually get a really precise output. For example, with code generation, that it's the most precise that I have seen. When you give an example of a method or a file, when requesting to generate code, it will try to accomplish with what you presented inside the code. Obviously, you have to specify that you want it to use that specific format and respect those rules. So it's really useful if you are trying to generate things that are precise and that can be kind of logical. Okay, so let's create a prompt. And in this case, for this example, we are not going to use ChatGPT because for this one, I want to focus on analyzing like the difficulties of the prompt, which things can be controlled or which doesn't are not possible to control. Um, things like difficulties with the model. So we are going to go with this example that I already created, and we are just going to review the output of that prompt. In this case, the first one is create an image of miscommunication. It's really general and has a lot of the weaknesses that I mentioned here. It's a vague, it has implicit assumptions, it's assuming that the AI model knows what is miscommunication and that it has the image that I have in mind of miscommunication. And also it's an open-ended question because it's like generate whatever you understand by miscommunication. Knowing that our final objective is to get an image that represents miscommunication between two individuals by showing how they can reach each other because they use different languages. That is the specific image I want to generate. But first, we are going to start with a general prompt, and then we will go from that point towards and try to improve it. This is the output. It's almost what I wanted to from the beginning. It actually has two persons on the picture. It has a speech balloon, each one of them. They are talking of symbols. It's not clear enough that they are talking on different languages because they have the same symbols on there. And there's a thing hidden in there that I'm gonna explain after the exercise, but at the end of this exercise. But just bear in mind that there is something that we need to analyze on there. And as we see, it's almost close, but first of all, it has two images. They are using the same symbols to talk. And I didn't like the styling, but I will get to that in a next iteration to improve the prompt. So after I saw this image, I tried to add more details to modify the result and to try to get to what I want. So I add more details. Create an image of miscommunication, include two individuals that are trying to communicate, but they cannot because both of them are speaking on different languages. And the result of that prompt is something like this. So we got the initial part of they trying to communicate, and it seems like they're having difficulties to communicate. But the bad thing is that they have only one speech balloon for both of them, and they are using the same symbols again. We are seeing a pattern here with the symbols. So I decided to add more details. I wanted to change the styling of the drawing and also try to add more restrictions to avoid, for example, things like just having one speech balloon. I want it to be one for each one, and I want it to have a different language for each one, or at least symbols that make sense that they are talking of a different language for each one. So I add those details in a way of instructions, restriction for this one. I create an image of miscommunication and make sure to add the following details. I specify that I want a comic style because I like comic style.
Okay, we do apologize. I think that we lost John. I'm contacting.
I specified to draw. Yeah. Here we have.
Just for you to know, we lost you for about 30 seconds. So if you can repeat, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'm gonna go from the last slide. We just got, I was saying that we got an output close to what I wanted, but it has only a speech balloon. So, and they are still using the same symbols to communicate. So I'm gonna improve the prompt and try to separate this speech balloon and try to request for symbols that actually make sense, that are talking on different languages. So that is what I included on here. I create an image of miscommunication and make sure to add the following details. I'm giving a hard constraint here and by requesting to make sure to include these elements. So it's like an order. And then I use comic style because I like it. I ask or request to draw a person that has one speech balloon with only weird symbols. And lastly, I ask to draw another person that has one speech balloon with normal letters. Here we have a problem with this prompt that I'm gonna address right now, and is weird symbols, normal letters. These two terms, or like elements, are something that are ambiguous, because weird symbols can be anything and normal letters are included on those weird symbols, because it can be like Greeks, it can be Chinese, it can be Russian, German. So it has two flaws on these two constraints that I added. Weird symbols can be anything, even words, and normal letters are words. So even if it tries to achieve that, it's not gonna be the expected result. So let's check the output. So as we see here, it actually make it to look like a comic style. It achieved that specific. Then it separated the speech balloons. It did it right. But then the symbols are not exactly different. They like kind of share some common symbols, and doesn't is not clear enough. And now here I'm going to introduce the thing that I told, like the missing concept that we were going to skip at the beginning of this task, when I say that the symbols are the same, and that there is something that we need to have in count, and is that the model generating this image is DALL-E, is an image generation model. And this model has difficulties to draw images. It probably is because it has too much variables. It's difficult to make up a text inside the image. And the result is that it makes up what actually is writing. It just tried to put anything in there that kind of resembled what you are asking. So even if I added a proper definition on these two constraints, if I added, for example, Chinese letters and Spanish letters, actual Spanish letters, it will still generate something like this on the speech balloons, because it's a limitation on the model, in specific on DALL-E. Probably there is other models that are actually able to generate text, but this one is not. And then that leads us to the limitations. Depending on the model, you can have limitation on the amount of tokens. I remember that in one of the previous talks, they defined it that the tokens are the words or the meaning used after separating the sentence, and those tokens are like each one of those elements of the sentence. And there are some models that have limitations. If you are using a pilot model or an API that needs payment, then probably that amount of tokens is going to change how much you pay. Also, the purpose of the model. And if you are trying to generate an image and a model that is not able to generate images, well, that is a barrier that can be unlocked if you are communicating with a model that is not specialized on that. And also the capabilities of the model. As we saw here, even if it's a model to generate images, it can have difficulties when generating text inside those images. So when you are working with a model, make sure to see the documentation of the model and learn which limitations and how does it work with the specific parts or requests, if it's specialized on generating code, if it's specialized in generating documents, resumes. Make sure to look into those details, because you can be requesting something that the model is not specialized on doing so. And also have in count that the refinement, the data sets that you can provide to a model will help you to improve that behavior. So to start closing the presentation, in conclusion, you have to income some items, understand the objective that you are trying to achieve, make sure to know what you are trying to do, because if not, will be like trying to come up with something, and that is not something useful with AI models, because the AI model will try to assume a lot of things too. Try to explain it to someone else to clarify possible doubts. Take your time to talk to someone else, and try to give the prompt in a way that that person understands you and is able to at least answer if he knows to do it or not. And if you're able to do that, probably you have enough information to start creating your prompt. Test the prompts, improve based on the output. If the output is not enough good for you or for the output that you're expecting, improve the prompt based on the output. Check which detail doesn't complete what you are trying to do, and add the details to adjust that specific part. And iterate. Do it multiple times until you reach a point where you say, this is the most clear solution or the most clear result that I want to get, and it has all the details that I wanted it to include. In that point, then you have your prompt with all the details necessary if you get the expected result. Also, if you want to learn more about it, I haven't done this certification, but it exists, and I'm planning to get one. If you want to increase the quality of your prompts, if you need to improve the quality of the outputs that you are generating, then search for prompt engineering. Search courses, search certifications. There is a lot of communities that are already teaching about this, Amazon, OpenAI, IBM. So take your time to take a look into it, because it's what actually it's being used to improve the quality of the prompts, and they have different strategies and ways to improve a prompt. So it's worth looking into it. Yeah, I think that was all from my part. I don't know if there's questions.
Thank you so very much, John. And if you have questions for him, you can raise your hand. You can send the questions to the chat, okay? So let's wait. So if you have comments regarding the presentation, regarding the tool that John used, you can send it. I'm gonna also send the feedback form over here. Okay. So I think that we do not have any questions. John, we really appreciate the knowledge that you share with us today. Thank you so very much. Well, we have Francisco. Go ahead, Francisco.
Yeah, actually, I have a question. I don't know if you mentioned this. I joined a little late, but would it make sense to use ChatGPT to also help create the prompts? If you tell it, for example, you're a prompt engineer, help me improve this prompt so it's more, accurate or something like that.
Oh, great question. Actually, yes, I have been using OpenAI, for example, to improve my prompts. Like I create a prompt, and this is also part of the process of creating the prompt for me, at least for now. I create a basic prompt, then I request the model to help me to improve this prompt. And I specify what I want to achieve, and it actually generates a new prompt with the details I specified. And then you can test that prompt on a different model and check if it is the expected result. And even you can use as feedback that output. You can say to the model, hey, I got this output, but I wanted this. So the model will try to improve that prompt to achieve that specific detail that didn't look like you wanted. So it's a great practice, and I do it a lot.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Other question? Okay, I think that we can close over here the presentation. John, as I was telling you, thank you so very much. Also to all the Gapsters who attended Data and Fest, thank you so very much. Your attendance makes really these events really special. We also appreciate if you fill out the feedback form that I just sent to the chat. And thank you so much. All of you have a great day.